We're here again. Welcome back to Cigar Time. We're still ever so friendly, correct?
Sort of, yeah.
We try.
We try.
Indeed. The
Welcome
show
back,
is.
Well, Joe especially. We're very pleased to have Joe Mosko back with us for a second week. Today we're going to talk about the #1 rated cigar by Cigar Aficionado in the 2020?
Yep.
Yeah, 2020, which is the latest one. With an unbelievable score of 98, which I believe is the highest ever score in the 20-odd years they've been doing this.
For a #1, yeah.
Yeah, for a #1 cigar, incredible. So, without further ado, let's light our cigars.
You know, this wrapper tastes so good, you almost don't have to like the cigar.
I've had cigars like that before. I'm not liking this thing. I'm just gonna savor it for like 10 minutes. Yeah. Then it's all soggy.
The wrapper tastes good.
You know what cigar was like that? I liked opening boxes of La Gloria, the Series R's. When you used to open them up and just smell like all 24-foot bands.
Yes.
Oh my God, it was an unbelievable.
You have like a
Can't
foot
do
fetish.
that now.
No,
Can't do that now.
they come in cellophane. Yeah.
Josh would do that with every time. Every time he opened a box of the Series R, he'd bring it back to me and be like,
Smell this, yeah. It's so
this
good.
bouquet of like cherry every time.
It was awesome.
But don't you love it when people come into a store? By the way, you folks shouldn't do this, but when they come into a store and they pick a cigar that's in cellophane and they smell it.
Yeah.
Through the cellophane.
It's got great notes of cellophane, but that's about all you're gonna get.
Yeah, I laugh under my breath.
You know, I don't even notice. Yeah, now that you say it, but it's, I guess because it's so common.
Unbelievable. Well, what is it that we're smoking, Joe?
We are smoking the Pledge. And actually, we're smoking the prequel, which is a Robusto, which is a 5.5 by 50.
It's box pressed.
Box pressed. And it's a Connecticut seed Havana wrapper, Ecuadorian binder, and a Nicaraguan filler.
And
it's kind of really, when you think about it, the cool thing about the Pledge, it's really Ernesto's first full-bodied cigar.
Mm-hmm.
Something that he's really looked at for a while. He's always, you know, I think we were talking about this in the last show, you know, Ecuadorian Smash being his type, he's more of a medium body, he likes cream, you know, he likes smoothness, you know, so he tends to stick to mild medium bodied cigars.
You wouldn't consider a lot of story?
I consider it medium.
Personally, I would. But
at first glance, this does not look like a traditional Connecticut wrapper. I mean,
It's a Connecticut Havana.
Yeah.
but it's really dark.
grown in Ecuador or in Connecticut?
In Connecticut, it's grown in Connecticut.
It's
a
a Habano seed grown in Connecticut.
It's really dark for one, not being a broadleaf.
It's the color of a broadleaf.
It is.
For sure.
Almost, yeah.
For sure. No, it is.
There's some major fermentation going on.
Yeah.
It's never.
You think?
Yeah.
#1 cigar, 98 rating. And what is the price of this cigar?
Joe?
$10.75.
Again for pattern.
Yes. It's
Yeah, sounds about.
So basically, if you want a #1 rating, it has to be 1075.
1075. Yeah.
Maybe that's the whole thing. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's a trick.
We've all. I'm sure everybody smoked the Sojourn also, which is the Toro
Toro
size.
size,
Yeah.
Notice any difference between the two?
The size.
Ever notice any difference in the flavor?
I always like Robustos better than Toros.
You like Robustos better than Toro?
No
More
matter what
flavor.
the blend is.
There's more flavor.
I find that there's more flavor, and I personally suffer from cigar ADD. So a cigar that's longer than this, I tend to get bored, even if it's really good.
Mm-hmm.
In the back half, I tend to get bored. So Robustos are perfect for me because as soon as I get bored, it's time for another cigar anyway.
Yeah.
I agree, but that's why I smoke a Toro instead of like a 6x60 or a Churchill or a.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get bored with it. Yeah, you're right.
Maybe I should switch to. I could buy a lot more cigars. I could switch to Robusto.
Yeah.
Well,
That is a cure.
go to Petite Coronas.
That's a great size.
I love that stuff.
Yeah.
Too small for me.
In fact,
I like regular
have,
Corona.
I have to tell you, Joe,
I like a
out
little
of
thicker
all of the fantastic cigars that you guys make,
And they do make a lot.
My everyday go-to favorite are the interludes.
Isn't that
Both the Connecticut and the Maduro. I love those little
Yeah, like that
cigars.
little size.
I-
Joe, what are some of the other cigars that Ernie makes?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, it's funny, we were talking about the Gloria Gabbana Series R, you know, he introduced that. You know, when you look at the series, the number 5 and number 6 were, you know, 54
Yeah, they were big
and
cigars.
56 ring gauges.
At the
Back in that time,
yeah.
it looked monstrous.
Yeah.
But, you know, one of our better selling cigars, you know, our best selling cigars is the Inch, which he's continued to do, which comes in for his natural Maduro, and it's his big ring gauge cigar. And the coolest thing I always, you know, listen to talk about the big ring gauge cigar is, you know, when you look at the Inch, there's no Robustos, Toros, and anything like that. I think it's always, I get amazed, I think Paul can go dive into this a little bit deeper, is when you're talking about blending a bigger ring gauge cigar, it's gotta be different than a Robusto or a Toro because of the wrapper ratio, the wrapper
Yeah,
filler
exactly.
ratio. So that's why the Inch is only in bigger ring gauge cigars, which you're seeing these days.
So it was blended to be a big cigar
Big ring
from
gauge cigar,
scratch.
yep.
Which
And that
makes,
makes a huge difference.
I was just gonna say, and I want you to pontificate on that.
Well,
He's a great pontificator.
typically, smaller cigars or smaller ring gauge
I'm
cigars
blind from that.
have a higher ratio of wrapper to filler. So, and since the flavors of wrappers are typically much more intense than the flavor of fillers,
That brings up another
you get
Yeah.
more flavor out of a smaller cigar. And typically what blenders do is they blend to a Corona. That's tradition. They start with that. And then they adjust the blend to try to bring the flavor back to the same place in a bigger size. Unless they start out wanting to make a big ring gauge cigar, and then they'll blend to a 6x60 to begin with. That'll be the root blend that they use.
Who here buys into that 60% of the flavor, 70% of the flavor?
Some people used to say 90.
I disagree.
I've
I
always
don't-
disagreed.
I think I disagree. I don't have enough experience or I'm just gonna start with knowledge, but
Take the wrapper off a light shade cigar and then smoke the bunch.
well then, okay, you know what, then, yes, then you could then take it to the next level and say, okay, well, a lighter cigar the filler may contribute more. Take a cigar that has Nicaraguan filler and a Connecticut wrapper. Now that's all, as far as I'm concerned, that is
All
all
the
filler.
flavors coming from the filler.
Yeah,
Right.
a bunch.
But, and you know this because you've been studying it, in today's blending era, they use binder not just for its physical properties, which is tradition. They use binder as a flavor adjunct, and they're using different leaves than they've ever
Cameroon.
used for binders.
Yes.
A lot of
That's-
people are
that's-
using Cameroon.
I
Well,
found
blind.
that odd. I-
As expensive as Cameroon is, and as fragile as Cameroon is, you know, it
Well, as a binder, they pick the ugly leaves.
Yeah,
that's all.
yeah, I get
That's-
it.
That's
I
what they do.
understand, yeah.
The ones that they couldn't sell as wrapper.
and Cameroon, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
I wonder if I wonder if that increases the yield for
The
Cameroon.
yield, it absolutely
Because,
does.
okay, all right, well, we'll take that one because I know it's cracked or
Well,
not
we put it-
cracked,
use
but
it
I
as
know
a
it
binder,
has a
yeah.
blemish, but
Blemish.
we'll put it as a binder.
But
Of
isn't
course,
the
you don't sell binder for the same price that you sell wrapper.
Exactly.
But at least you're not wasting all of that tobacco.
right?
And that's a relatively new thing over the last maybe
10
5 or
years.
6, 10 years maybe?
About
Okay.
10 years that people started using interesting binders for flavor.
Yeah, I remember when we first started talking about that. I think we actually mentioned that on the show, and maybe even Larry Palumbo.
Yeah.
Yeah, years ago,
yeah.
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 Great guy, Larry.
Yeah,
I
yes.
stay in touch with him.
Good.
But the binders
Doing
used for
something new.
is for to help with the burn. But using a
We're just gonna
Cameroon,
burn it the same ratio.
but the Cameroon wrapper burns quicker than any of the other leaves because it's so fragile.
But you would want that, the outside to burn faster than the inside.
Makes sense.
Also, if you use a fairly high priming of Cameroon, it gets a little thicker.
Does it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Since Cameroon is pretty much exclusively grown in Africa, I once read, I've never been there to see it, but I once read that a lot of the plants, a lot of the Cameroon plants are grown with a much heavier dose of water. My,
Actually don't know that.
oh, okay, all right. Well, I turn to you for that.
Well, no, when we were
something up.
experimenting to grow Cameroon and Ecuador, we did have to use a tremendous amount of water, but
Okay.
I don't know if they do it that way now.
Well, of course, where they're at, they're probably getting a tremendous amount of water, naturally.
Yes.
I'm just curious, because I know how, in your opinion, what would you say in non-binders, what would you say the hardiest leaf is? We know Cameroon's gonna be the most fragile.
Havana 2000.
Okay, so that was blended to resist blue mold and things like that.
Yes, and it's thick, and although it's oily, the oils that are in it don't burn so easily.
Right.
So people used to joke that Havana 2000 was the only flame-resistant wrapper in the cigar industry.
Which is not a good thing.
No, it's not a good. But what they eventually discovered was that an extended period of fermentation took that problem away
Away,
completely.
yeah. And unless I'm missing something, there has not been a severe outbreak of blue mold down in Central America for many years now.
No.
Is that because they've gotten better to plant seeds that are resistant to it, or is it just the luck of the draw?
It's both. They're planting more resistant seeds, but also, and I hate to nudge towards anything that sounds remotely political, but due to global warming, the incidence of blue mold overall is much less than it used to be.
Wasn't that mostly Corojo that was susceptible to that?
Well, in Cuba, yeah.
Where they use a lot of grow leaf.
But broadleaf in Connecticut is very subject to blue
Yeah,
mold.
they had problems with that.
And
over the years.
there have been years where the whole crop was devastated.
Yeah.
Is that why they're having trouble now getting Maduro wrappers?
It's not why they're having trouble right now, but a few years ago it was, and that's when things like Pennsylvania broadleaf
Yeah.
and Mexican Maduro, St. Andres,
Mhm.
started to become more popular.
Popular.
Not because they got better, they were good already, but because there was no access to Connecticut broadleaf, so they had to use something else.
Interesting.
Well, I mean, the wrappers, I mean, it's the first thing, it's what customers buy the cigar. Most customers, not, a lot of customers will buy the cigar based on the cigar band and the look of the wrapper. So that's why companies put so much emphasis on, I mean, they want to pick the most pristine, smoothest wrapper that they have. And it's also the most expensive part of the cigar.
By far.
So they that's why they, and what makes the great wrapper is how much time they put into color sorting it and also the fermentation of it.
Absolutely. And I hate to say it.
Well, now that we're halfway in, let's give our first review.
Damn good. I remember when I first had this cigar, Joe, I was like, I don't know what it was, but I was like, maybe it was the size. I was like, it's good, but now, like, people are like, what's the number one cigar? And is it, well, I'm like, yeah, it's,
Yeah, it's good.
It's a worthy number one.
Rob?
It is. I'm getting a cocoa taste and a sweetness from the wrapper. Yeah, and before when I smelled the foot, I definitely got a lot of cocoa in it, and the sweetness from the darker wrapper. I think it's fantastic.
I think I am too. I guess I didn't want to say it because it seems like that. I review a lot of cigars and say that, and because it's has such a dark wrapper, I'm wondering if my eyes make me think that because it's so
Cocoa.
dark and
Yeah.
Cocoa.
cacao.
Yeah, cacao. Paul?
Well, the predominant note for me is actually sweet.
Yeah.
That I taste sweet first.
Great finish.
And then a little bit of pepper, not too much, a lot of what I would call sweet tobacco. And now I don't mean sweet, I mean tobacco is
Yeah.
sweet. A lot of that flavor as well. I love it.
I
I'm
think.
also getting cedar, a little bit.
All right, I didn't get that. I was gonna say I think because of the strength of the cigar, which is, I'm gonna go like medium to full, but the, maybe in this case it's the wrapper, how powerful the flavor is. I almost feel like I need to slow down and not smoke it as quickly as other cigars, because it then, that one flavor, because I can just feel it,
Yeah.
like the finish on my tongue, and it's,
Overpowers the rest.
I don't wanna say, maybe overpower, but that seems like a negative connotation to me.
It's just dominant.
But dominant, so I guess my recommendation, or what I think you need to just smoke it a little bit slower and get more of the nuances, and you're not like, give your palate a little bit of time to cleanse from that finish before you take the second puff.
I can describe it in 3 words. 3 words.
Very,
Describe it
very
all.
good.
Taste, taste, and taste.
Yeah.
That's a tasty cigar.
It is.
Period, end of story. And it's a cigar that anybody can smoke. Not that powerful that someone who basically just getting started can't smoke. And it will, the most mature smoker, it'll satisfy their urge, their needs. I mean, it's just a great cigar.
I think that's what you heard a lot, you know, when we launched the cigar originally, you know, before the rating and everything like that, you know, it was a very limited release. And that was the overall feeling that a lot of people did. It was just a very tasty, you know, rich, flavorful cigar that people really enjoyed.
Do you remember that Zoom call we did with Ernie?
The way he launched it with that.
With that. And my comments on that show were, this is a great cigar. Without even knowing much about it, at that point in time, I said, I think you got a winner here. And sure enough, little did I know
Yeah.
how much of a winner it was.
The finish is so long.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
after you blow that smoke out, the flavor just keeps coming.
Yeah, it just lingers right there, right on the, like, the front half of the tongue.
It's hard to think.
What did you say the bundle was, Joe?
Ecuador.
Do you know what type, or just that it came from Ecuador?
I just know it comes from Ecuador.
It's funny how sometimes some companies will get so detailed about,
Yeah.
like filler, they'll tell you about the region
The
that it's
region it
from,
comes
the
in, yeah.
strain of tobacco,
Yeah.
and then others just like Padron. It's Nicaragua.
It's Nicaragua.
It's always funny when you talk about that. You're at an event, you're talking to different people, and some people just want to know the basics, and then people just like, well, Nicaragua what? You know,
Right.
and they'll go into it. So, and there's just so much more that goes into it. Just saying Nicaragua, Ecuador, Dominican, there's variations across the board that you can do. So there's so many different things going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should revisit that topic in one of the coming weeks, because I did a calculation, and there are literally 400 million possible combinations
yeah.
of tobacco to make one cigar.
There's gotta be.
That's a lot.
Because when you take into consideration stuff that most people don't think of is how long it's been fermented,
And at what temperature and at what humidity.
the priming. Was it sun grown or is it under cheesecloth? What lot was it grown on in Nicaragua?
Yeah.
What nutrients went into the soil? All
Could have
those
been lot
things.
23.
It all makes a whole lot of difference.
Yeah,
A whole lot of difference.
Or cloud cover.
Yeah.
Or
Like
cloud cover.
Yeah.
or an Ecuador.
Or cheesecloth.
Actually, lot 23, there is no lot 23.
I know.
It's lot
Well, I thought I'd
23.
throw that in there. Because Scott, I know you had some questions of Paul.
Yeah, tell me about wrapper. Well,
Wouldn't it be easier just asking the meaning of life?
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, actually, that would be.
That's a whole show
I was
right
doing
there.
I was doing some research, and this is like top level, not getting into the details that we were just talking about, that where you come up with what'd you say, 400 million different combinations about wrapper. And I guess the easiest way, the highest level to classify it is what most people see is light and dark. Now, a lighter tobacco tends to be, or a lighter cigar, we'll say, tends to be, with wrappers lighter, tends to be a milder cigar. Has nothing to do with the wrapper.
No.
The strength all comes from the filler, but a lighter wrapper the flavors seem to meld better with tobaccos, the fillers and binders that aren't as strong, not as much Ligero. Whereas a darker cigar typically goes better with stronger or more Ligero, higher nicotine content fillers. So the rule of thumb is okay, but it has nothing to do with the wrapper, because there are certain cigars that are extremely dark that are still mild.
Mild,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
But as a rule of thumb, it's okay.
People make that mistake with Maduro wrappers a lot. They
Yeah.
presume that they're going to be very, very strong just because they're so dark.
Right.
And in fact, the process of making a Maduro reduces the strength of the tobacco
Right.
significantly and replaces it with that
Sweetness.
special sweetness
Right.
that you only get from a Maduro.
Right. And they're actually, I mean, we start with a light cigar or dark cigar. I mean, that's the easiest, but there are, I mean, there's probably hundreds of colors, but there are 7 basic colors. It starts with Candela, Claro, I know, Colorado Claro, Colorado Maduro, Maduro, Colorado Maduro, and then Oscuro. And it's like the Candela's green, Colorado is Claro's tan, Colorado Claro's make a medium brown, and then the
It's darker.
colors get darker as you go, and then all the way through the Oscuro, which is like jet black. And the difference between Maduro and Oscuro is just fermentation time, right?
Well, yes, but
temperatures.
also Oscuro is a color
Yeah.
and Maduro is a process.
Right.
That's that's a very interesting point that most people don't know.
It's not that a Maduro wrapper is naturally automatically dark.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a matter of fermentation. It's temperature and time.
Right.
And when you create a Maduro, basically what you're doing is letting it get hotter while it's fermenting.
And the prolong.
Because it naturally produces heat.
From the pressure, from the chemical and the pressure
Well,
and
it's
the heat.
mostly yeast eating sugar creates heat.
Right.
And that's what you have going on in the pilons, in the big pile up of tobacco, is you have naturally occurring yeast eating naturally occurring sugar and creating flavor, oil, and color. That's what comes out of it. So if you let it get hotter before you stop it, and you do it for a longer time, you wind up with a much darker leaf. Which is why at other times people would cook their Maduros.
Mhm.
They would, after they were harvested and fermented and done, they would heat them just to make them darker.
It's still done a lot. There are still.
But not by the good guys.
No, I was gonna say, it tends to be the lower end, you
Just
know,
to save
right,
time.
bargain
Well,
cigars.
because time is money in the cigar business.
Yeah.
And in contrast to that, you've got the Candela, which is green, which is, they stick it in a room, and there's lots of different ways, but they stick it in a room, they superheat it, and in 3 days, 3 or 4 days, it's dry,
72 hours.
and it maintains all the
Whereas normally
chlorophyll.
you would hang up harvested tobacco for 30 days minimum,
At
and
least,
sometimes
yeah.
as long as 90. Candela, because of the amount of heat that they apply, is ready faster, but it's Candela. It's still got all that chlorophyll.
Yeah.
Here's the kick though with Candela, or American Market Selection,
AMS.
AMS is what they used to call it. Doesn't, I mean, I would guess that 1% or less of our sales are Candela, probably even less now.
it's way less.
I bet you it's less
Now
than
we're
half.
Names of
40
the
years
Candela cigar
ago,
we have.
40 years ago.
Yeah.
That was all you could get.
Yeah, all the cigars were green. I mean, it's
Yeah.
amazing. The only cigars that weren't green were the stuff that comes in a little box in the drugstore.
Now, did that change? What
Taste
caused
change.
that change?
Taste.
I mean, no, I mean, which, you think, like, consumers and the population's changed?
I think people
But
just
how
got
would they
tired
know?
of, they got tired of smoking a chlorophyll tasting cigar.
You think that, how would they know any different, though? That's what I
Well,
wonder.
no, back when they were all green, they didn't, and that's why it was so popular.
I wonder if maybe it came with
The Cubans
the
did.
embargo, because they were,
The Cubans did it, because the Cubans never made a Candela, as far as I know. As far
No,
as I
they,
know. I never saw a Candela or anything close to a Candela in any Cuban factory I visited.
so then in '62, they go from all dark, all brown cigars, we'll call, like, Colorado.
Yeah, but that's.
So now they can't get those
But that was
anymore.
the evolution of Nicaragua and the Dominican Republic, and Honduras.
But why did they go from that to then just green?
Because I think
they
people's
were in a
taste
hurry.
changed. Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at. Is
I
what-
don't think it was a matter of a decision like we could make a really good cigar if we do this to the tobacco.
Yeah.
I think it was more like,
Okay.
we need wrapper now.
Supply and demand.
Yeah.
And if
That's
we
what I
can
was
get
trying to get
wrapper
to.
in 72 hours instead of in 90
Yeah,
days,
that's-
we're on it.
Yeah.
That's,
People
that
must-
was the thought process back
I
then.
guess people must have been, I mean, so you would, I mean, what, you
I
went
smoked
from,
green cigars, yeah, of course, for years.
was it just because, did you like them? I mean, I guess you did if you kept smoking them.
Yeah, I did, but I also was buying as early back as I can remember. I was also buying Cuban
Mhm.
because after the embargo, the merchants that still had Cuban cigars were allowed to sell
You know
off
what,
their
that's true,
inventory.
that's a good point.
So I was
Except for the Petite Altmans.
and I started my first cigars were Philly's Bonanzas, which actually in those days
Real
was a
tobacco.
Panatella. It was real tobacco, and it was brown. And I probably smoked green cigars and didn't really like them. I didn't like that chlorophyll taste, and I started buying Cubans. And then it evolved from Cubans to Nicaragua, and then here we are, 50-some years later. I've been smoking it for almost 60 years.
I think if you looked at it numerically, these days, probably 75% of Candela sales happen around St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
Just because they're green.
Probably.
Yeah, I can't even remember last time we sold a green box.
Only special order.
Yeah, or
And there was
or
like
St. Patty's Day.
There was like 3 different kinds that we had.
All right, I think we're time to wrap up and give our final review and put a number on it. Paul, why don't you start?
This is almost perfection.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go 975 on this one.
Decent number. Scott? Tough grader than you are.
I'm actually getting more, it's starting to get creamy.
Mhm.
And that's
Cigar.
at the end of the cigar, so that's a little unique. Getting the cocoa that you talked about, I'm gonna go with a 9.5.
Tough grader. I already know Rob's number. Go ahead, but tell us
You
about
don't
it.
know my number, but
Uh-oh.
this cigar is very smooth, like last week's, but it's not as silky as last week's smoke. I get
Yeah.
yes, it's more peppery, and I get a lot more of the wood taste in this cigar.
You're getting wood. We haven't used that one in a long. We haven't done that in a long time.
I'm with Paul with this 975.
That's exactly what I thought you were going to say.
It's not, in my opinion, it's a phenomenal cigar and it's deserving of number one.
And you want
but I like last
to
week's better.
contrast Scott.
I like it. I like last week's better because of the silkiness of it, but this is still a phenomenal cigar. 975. It's a great rating.
It's really hard to argue with a number one cigar with a 98 rating. I mean, it's
Yeah.
really hard to argue against that. I mean, it is just, from the first one I smoked on that pre-launch video we did with Ernie, this is a 975. I can go 980 and I wouldn't argue it. It's as close to perfection as I can get.
It's really good.
I mean, it's a champion cigar. Has good mouthfeel and great taste. Well, as we wrap up today's show,
Smoke it slowly.
we ask you to watch our Saturday night show, which is on at 8 o'clock. Save yourself some money on our value packs, etc. We're going to be back next week. We hope you are as well. And we thank you for watching and keep
Bye.
smoking and
Bye,
keep
Mom.
enjoying.
Ciao for
Thanks,
now,
Bye-bye for
everybody.
now.
Life's too short to smoke cheap cigars.